So what I'm going to talk about, and I've got some slides, but as we're going through, I might just sort of jump one or two just so we give us more time for discussion. The summary of presentation, this is it. I mean, essentially what I'm going to be talking about is the issue of human dignity and human autonomy, and the control, what I call the control problem of AI technology, and how these some of the practices of AI technology through Facebook and Google and the other big tech companies are essentially undermining our dignity by undermining our autonomy, because dignity and autonomy are related. And the control problem of AI technology is essentially, the key question is, who is in control? Is it us or the machines, AI machines that Facebook and Google and the other big tech companies use? With a specific example of Facebook, these are algorithms basically operated by AI technology that have the tendency to try and persuade us to spend as much time on Facebook, and with the ultimate purpose of making Facebook a lot wealthier. And so for every second we spend on Facebook, it creates more money, funds for Facebook. That's how the machines, these big tech companies operate. They try and keep us on site on their persuasive technology, managed by persuasive technologies, so they can make, that's basically their business model, to make more money at our expense, because our information, Shoshana Zuboff has said in one of her recent books, is essentially for them to make more money at our expense. In any case, so I'll be talking essentially about that, and this is something based on my current book, which was Stoic Philosophy and the Control Problem of AI Technology, and applying Stoic philosophy to examining the control problem of AI technology. Essentially because Stoic philosophy, the main purpose of Stoic philosophy is to present us with, to basically, one of their key principles is that is the control of our lives. They don't, of course, talk about technology, because technology wasn't invented then. We're talking about 2,000 years. The control problem of technology is namely, who is in control, circumstance or us. According to the Stoics, there's only one thing that we can control, is our judgments, our freedom, inner freedom, and that we can't control. It's up to us. This is basically, Stoic philosophy also inspired and influenced cognitive behavioral therapy, which is used today for treating certain problems, psychological problems. So the answer provided by the Stoics, who is in control of our lives as or circumstance, obviously not circumstances, certain things they are not in our control. So we shouldn't worry about that, because if we worry about that, then we will undermine our own eudaimonia, well-being. So the purpose of Stoic philosophy is to show that purpose of Stoic philosophy is to enable us to attain eudaimonia, or well-being. So this is something that the Assault on Human Dignity is something that comes from a book by let me just see, by Russell, The Assault on Human Being, and Russell, basically, I'm just going up here to okay, just let me see. Right, he's referring to a scene from a science fiction in the movie Elysium, where Max McDermott, and essentially says he's been charged by a machine, an artificial intelligence machine, and the question is, would these machines in the future do the same for us now? Anyway, let's just move forward. Yeah, according to Russell, Russell is a professor of robotics at Berkeley University. And he wrote this book called Human Compatible in 2019. So the assault on human dignity, according to Russell, it expresses a significant because it demonstrates the fundamental problem, the problem of control exercised by big tech companies through the use of AI technology over us. The meta question of the control problem of technology then becomes who controls the controllers. If this and AI machine research is so essentially in the control of these big tech in the control of these big tech companies, Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. As some of you will know, Google runs this big research project through DeepMind, which is located, it's part of Google, but it's located in London. So not only they run the, operate the machines, intelligent machines that through their persuasive technologies, such as Google, Facebook and Google, persuade us to do things that we would not normally do if it wasn't for that persuasion that is coming from these artificial intelligent machines, who are also autonomous. They work on their own. So the point Russell is making regarding is the growth of machine control over humans, and that's becoming more and more evident, especially through these artificial intelligent machines. So it should remind us of the control problem of technology, which is in this presentation, namely the overarching control over most of our lives as individuals and collectively as a society by the big tech companies through use of unaccountable AI technology. Now, these AI technologies, of course, their work in their operation is unaccountable because it's opaque, it's monopolistic. We don't have any control over it, and governments don't have any control over it. It's mainly primarily controlled by the big tech companies. Now, the issue then becomes the control problem of AI technology is namely that this persuasive technology control us, but the problem is the meta control problem is the research of artificial intelligence is also controlled by these big tech companies. So the question is, who is controlling the controllers? I'll say here, and interestingly enough, this, I say here at the bottom, it mimics, ironically and paradoxically, it mimics the actual Stoic philosophy. It mimics Stoic philosophy and their response to how we control the slings and arrows of outrageous fortunes, circumstance. We control it by namely not being concerned about something we can't control, and we control ourselves, our freedom, our autonomy, which the Stoics call proeresis, our volition, essentially. And through virtue, we try and live a life that through that can attain, eudaimonia or well-being. Now, when I was writing this book, this came to my notice because I was reading Russell's book, and I thought, and what he says is this something, how AI machines control us. There's two ways that AI machines can control us. They can try and control our circumstances, but it's very difficult for them to do so. So what they do is that they create expectations through us, through persuasion and manipulation that we're often, most of the time, we're not aware of, to try and control the way we think and the way we behave. And essentially, this is the method of cognitive behavior therapy, which also was influenced by Stoic philosophy. Namely, you can't control your emotions, and according to the Stoics anyway, the emotions were states of mind. Try and control your thinking if you want to attain eudaimonia. So essentially something that came up in the earlier presentation, is to try and overcome your anger, control your emotions, and through that acquire sort of tranquility and control over your judgments. So the uncanny analogy which I mentioned in this presentation as a method of control is that it mimics, in a way, the method of Stoic philosophy. The only difference between the two is that Stoic philosophy and also cognitive psychology, behavioral therapy, that was influenced by Stoic philosophy, tries to change the way we think so we can attain well-being, or at least not be as unhappy as we would be if we allow our minds to be controlled from what happens outside us. So that's what the Stoic philosophy does. In contrast, the big tech companies for AI technologies use the same method, but instead of doing it for our own good, they do it for their own good. Namely, they try and influence our minds and change the way we think and certain judgments that we act on, in order for them to make more money. So it's not for our own good, it's for their own good. So this is what I call this uncanny, and this is the interesting relationship that I found when I was writing my book, Stoic Philosophy and Control Problem of AI Technology, that AI, these big tech companies have taken the method. Maybe, I'm not saying that they consciously thinking of Stoic philosophy when they did, but certainly they do study psychology in Silicon Valley. A lot of the people who work for these companies have studied psychology and use psychology persuasively to influence us. So it's a type of Stoic methodology, which they may not be aware that it's a Stoic methodology. Although, ironically, I was thinking that apparently Stoic philosophy is very popular in Silicon Valley. Who knows? I mean, maybe they were influenced by it, but instead of using it for our own good, they are trying to influence our minds because that's what their business model is, to make as much money as they do, and they make a lot of money, as we do know. So that's why I chose Stoic philosophy as a method of basically because it's the same control. The Stoic philosophy is saying, how do you control circumstances? The control problem of technology, how do we control ourselves when we are being controlled by AI technology? So I thought Stoic philosophy is a good way to respond to that problem and first of all, expose what the problem is and say that we can use Stoic philosophy in order to, in a way, fight back against the big tech companies. The problem of dignity is that if autonomy and freedom are necessary for our dignity, and therefore it's important to recover our dignity through recovering our freedom and autonomy as human beings, both individually and collectively, by responding to the control problem of AI technology, not individually, because if each one of us comes off Facebook or Google, it's not going to make a difference. We're talking about Facebook and Google and the other big tech companies essentially, I won't say control, but certainly influence more than 2 billion people around the globe, increasingly. So Stoic philosophy, because of its cosmopolitanism, is a unified philosophy that combines epistemology, ethics, and eudaimonia, is, I think, a good method of responding to the control problem of technology, both the control problem of technology, namely how we're being controlled at the moment, quite often without our knowledge, as it happened in Cambridge Analytica in 2016 that helped Trump become the president. So how we can control these technologies so they don't control us, but not as individuals, because if we come off Facebook and Google, it's not going to make a difference. We have to, as collectively as a society, become more aware of what's going on and try collectively respond to this problem globally. In the cosmopolitanism, that's comes through that. So stop share. Yes. So open for discussion. Do we have time for discussion?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Edward. I was smiling because I see cameras coming on. People are already ready to engage. Thank you for addressing a matter that's a pressing concern and one that keeps, I think, is going to continue. So addressing collective measures to kind of combat these is important. I see multiple hands up. I'm going to start with Haley. Haley, go ahead.
Oh, Michael was first if you want to take it.
Okay,
my
apologies.
No, I was not first. Haley, you were first. Sorry.
Oh, thank you so much. No, this is such interesting work. I'm very interested on a personal level as someone who's currently doing research on AI narratives and looking at this idea of control. I'm wondering sort of, when talking about potential solutions and this idea of us coming together as a public to resist this, do you see that sort of solution as being more a sort of democratizing of AI, or have you considered sort of potentials of, resisting the technology altogether and going for an even more extreme version that might seek to, not continue down those lines of AI, or again, more like recentering it just as a more democratic technology?
Very good question, Haley. I think trying to stop technology is practically impossible, and we probably don't want to. I mean, there are some very good things that come out of technology, and also AI technology, very useful. It's used in medicine, in many fields, and it's not used in this way that's been undermined, that's been used by big tech companies to undermine us purely for financial reasons. So I think it's not possible to reverse technology and reverse what's happening with the research on AI technology. There's a lot of people doing research in AI technology as we speak, and some of it is very important. And it could have some very beneficial outcomes in the future. But there is this danger that unless we, as you say, democratize the control, and I think there's been a lot more done in Europe than it has been I don't know. I think in the United States it's probably less so, but there are efforts happening. The question of collective action is very important, and there's been work done in philosophy, collective moral responsibility. For example, a colleague of mine, Seamus Miller from Australia, has written on that. So I think it's going to be a collective. We can't do it individually. Just as well as we can't respond to the climate change problem individually. It's got to be collectively and globally. Globally is very important. And as we've seen, though, people can think about this and talk about it conceptually, but unless we take action, nothing is going to happen. That's a problem. Action has to come into play. At the moment, we're not doing as much. I think the first strategy is to increase awareness. A lot of people are still not aware. I spoke at a Stoic conference yesterday, in fact, in Melbourne, part of Stoicon. And I was surprised that so many people who use Facebook pages for Stoic philosophy were not even aware what the control problem with AI technology is. People are not aware. It's not something that the public knows. It's not many books have, the books that have been written on AI technology are mostly written by physicists, scientists, maybe psychologists with regard to wisdom, philosophers, but they're not bestsellers. People go out and buy bestsellers. Although, a couple of books are, Russell's book is a penguin, So I don't know how many people got them, but it's very well written. And so there are other scientists who write more popular books that are trying to, but still it's not enough. So we need to engage through public debate, and that's what I think should happen. Thank you for your question.
And Michael, go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you very much, Spence.
Hi, Michael.
Yeah, so this was great. Thank you very much. I'm really intrigued. So the distinction between the control problem and the meta control problem, that is fantastic, especially with regard to AI. I was, thinking with your talk, I was wondering, first I thought, yeah, with regard to AI, this is really something new. And I was wondering, is it really new? Because, if you think about consumerism, for example, Coca-Cola, they want to sell,
Yes.
And
yes.
so that seems to be very similar. And it's also, it is a form of control because it's kind of occupying our thinking by focusing on buying stuff, So that seems to be similar. But so talking about the similarity, that would mean that the solution might also be similar, from an individualistic point of view, from an individual point of view, you could say a possible solution is education, because nobody's forced to use Facebook,
No,
so
no.
if people are kind of educated and develop the kind of autonomy. And, being, the idea of using Stoic philosophy and the idea of eudaimonia, the idea of self-care,
Yes,
so all these,
Yes.
so all these things would be very helpful with regard to the individual side. Now, what is really different is, and you brought it up by hinting at Cambridge Analytica, what is new with AI is the undermining of fundamentals of democracy, for example.
Yes.
So and that goes beyond consumerism, because
Absolutely.
we can consume, but we are still Democrats and are kind of living in democratic forms. Now, what I think is the real challenge. So and as you say, when it comes to those phenomena like the risks to democracy, the individual approach is never sufficient. So it needs to be an attempt for social control. But this, I think, is very hard. And the reason is it runs completely counter a culture that we developed over 200 years. And that is mainly, the culture with regard to government, So government is not supposed to interfere in our private lives,
Yes.
And you also hinting at Europe. I'm German, so it's very close to my mind. So, so there's certainly a history of a social control, which is much more developed. But as you also know, if you think about the idea of free speech, which is very highly regarded in the American context, so any attempt of social control will immediately run into the problem of limiting free speech. So I'm thankful for your work, but I'm also kind of depressed about the options that we already have.
Michael, thank you very much. All very good suggestions. But Michael, you're right. Education, and it has to start early. I'm talking about education at school, because a lot of children are getting sort of hooked on these persuasive technologies through Facebook, TikTok, and others, and Instagram. So those are the people that education will help. If we know as we know now, and I don't think this is, if it's like climate change, it's happening. AI technology is controlling us. There's been enough written by scientists, philosophers, psychologists to show that it is what they do. This is, and it's based on the business model, surveillance capitalism, so Shoshana Zuboff calls it. So there's no question about it. So if that's the case, then we can teachers in schools can present a course or something that shows students that these artificial technologies can be a boon for the future. It can be a very good thing for the future. It can help us solve problems that we can't solve now ourselves. And this AI technologies are very, very, they're very intelligent. The problem some are talking about now is that what happens, and Turing talked about that back in the 1950s, what happens if these AI technologies surpass us in intelligence? I mean, there are leaps and bounds of advances in AI research. So at the moment, they can only solve specific problems. What would happen though in the future? When they became as intelligent as we are now, we have general intelligence, we can apply it in different fields, and then surpass us. So they outpace our intelligence. What will happen then? Are they going to be? How will we be able to control them when they are far more intelligent than we are? As one researcher pointed, it would be the difference between us and gorillas in terms of intelligence. So that's the meta control problem. But even the control problem we are facing now today with these persuasive technologies is a real problem. And you're right about advertising. That's advertising works persuasively. The only thing about advertising is that we are aware that we've been trying to be persuaded by these advertisements. We're not aware, most of the time, we're not aware that AI machines are doing this persuasive work on us, unknown to us, without our permission. We don't give them permission to do this. In Cambridge Analytica, for example, they were tricked. So some face users were tricked. And then they passed that information on to their friends, but their friends themselves did not give permission for their information to be sold out to Cambridge Analytica so they could influence the presidential elections in 2016. So it's very important to act now, because what happens is that people forget and then we move on. So it's 2022, 2016, 6 years ago. That's everyone is forgotten about Cambridge Analytica. That's still going on now. Facebook metaverse, that's another story again. So these are important issues, but yeah, education, I think, is the key point here. Yeah, thank you very much, Michael.
Well, I want to thank you again, Edward, for a wonderful presentation. I think we could keep going with this topic for quite some time, it seems. But we got to get into our next speaker. However, I want to mention to all speakers, if you want to post your email address or a link to maybe some work that you're doing, please do it in the chat, and I'll link it up to the video when this goes to the YouTube channel.
I'll do that, Michael. Thank you very much. And thank you for your stewardship. It's been very nice meeting you for a very short time. I wish I was there in person. I mean, I've been going to APPE conferences for years, different venues, and Cincinnati is a particular venue that I really like to visit, but unfortunately, because of COVID, etc., it hasn't been proved. It hasn't proved possible, but I hope to be able to come to the States for the next APPE conference, wherever that's going to be. Thank you very much.